Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
The days were getting darker for George Graham. At first, he did not understand why black spots danced in front of his eyes when he read. His eyes hurt, and everything looked blurry. He should have stopped working, but he could not. This was his last school term. If he passed his exams, especially bookkeeping, he would get a job at Deacon Solomon Grant's store. The money would help him and his mother. George loved his mother deeply. When he was a baby, his first words were, "Pretty Mama." To him, she was the most special person in the world. He liked Susie Hale, a kind and sweet girl, but his mother was the most important. Mrs. Graham was the kind of woman a son could admire. She had been young when George was born, and now, at 33, she was still beautiful in his eyes. She was always delicate and gentle. George's father had protected her from all worries. But when he was dying, his biggest sadness was leaving her without support. When George was 13, his father called him to his bedside. He held George's hand and said, "You must take care of your mother. You are old enough to help her. Soon, you will work and keep her safe." George never forgot his father's words. He planned his whole life around helping his mother. After his father died, he wanted to leave school and start working, but his mother did not let him. Mrs. Graham was stronger than people thought. She knew that if George stopped studying, he would always have low-paying jobs. She made sure he stayed in school for 3 more years. People often wondered how she managed to live and take care of her home. She worked hard every day. She sewed for neighbors, helped sick people, and taught difficult children. She did whatever she could to earn money. It was not easy, but she never gave up. She believed that once George finished school, life would be better. With this hope, she stayed strong and kind. She never complained. She kept her beauty, her gentle heart, and her son's deep love. To George, loving his mother was the most important thing in his life. As George Graham's world grew darker, he thought only of his mother. All his dreams and hopes were for her. But what if he lost his sight completely? What if he could never help her but only be a burden forever? The thought made him desperate. He prayed for help, but nothing changed. His vision became worse, and his heart filled with sadness. He had always been a top student, but now he failed again and again. His teacher noticed but did not scold him at first. George told no one about his problem. He feared it would break his mother's heart. One day, after another failed lesson, his teacher finally spoke sternly. But then George could not hold back his pain. He stretched out his hands and cried, "God help me, sir. I am going blind. Cannot see my book. I can barely see your face." The room fell silent. Everyone was shocked. George's heart pounded loudly in the stillness. The teacher sent the other students away and tried to comfort him. Maybe it was not so bad. Maybe a doctor could help. But George felt no hope. His teacher's words meant nothing to him. As soon as he could, he left the school. He did not go home right away. He was afraid to face his mother. How would she react? Would she faint like she did when his father died? He sat down on a grassy bank beside a fast-moving stream. A terrible thought came to him. What if he ended everything right now? If he died, his mother would be free from the burden of taking care of a blind son. The river called to him with its soft murmur. He leaned forward, ready to let go. But then a deep longing filled him, to see his mother one last time. He pulled back and cried bitterly, "See her? What am I saying? I will never see her again." At that moment, a soft, gentle voice spoke behind him. "Yes, you will see her again." It was a girl's voice, kind, warm, and unexpected. "Yes, you will see her again." "I am sure you will," said a soft voice. George turned toward the sound. "Susie Hale? How did you get here?" he asked. "Don't be upset, George," she said gently. "I waited for you. I could not go home without telling you how sorry I am and trying to help you." "Help me?" George's voice was full of pain. "How can you help? Do you know what it means to never see the sky, the trees, or my mother's face again?" "But you will see them," Susie said kindly. "I don't mean you should give up. You must try to get better. I know people who were blind and got help. Why not you?" George was angry. "And where will we get the money? My mother worked so hard just to buy food. She was counting on me to help her soon. Now I will only be a burden." His voice broke. "I have no choice but to be useless or to die." Susie shivered at his words. She stepped closer and looked into his sad, tired face. "George, you believe in God. You won't go against his plan. If he wants you to face this, you must be strong. But I believe he wants you to fight, and I will not give up hope until every doctor has tried to help you. Right now, you must go home. Do you want your mother to hear this from someone else?" George sighed and stood up. "You are right. You are a good girl. Goodbye, Susie." She did not follow him. She only watched, happy that he was going home safely. At the gate, his mother was waiting. She took his hand, and he knew that she already knew the truth. "Your teacher was here," she said calmly. "He told me everything. My son, why did you suffer alone? Why did you not tell me?" "Oh, mother, I couldn't," he sobbed. "I thought it would break your heart. You don't understand, my child. Losing you would break my heart. But as long as I have you, I will never be completely sad. We will find help, God willing. And if not, we will face it together." Meanwhile, Susie had a plan. She needed to find money for George's treatment. She asked her uncle, Deacon Grant, to give her some of her own savings. But he refused. He said he would give a little to help, but no more. Then he tightly shut his lips and his pocket. Susie had one special treasure, a diamond ring that belonged to her mother. The stone was clear and bright, like a drop of water. She knew it was worth a lot of money, maybe $300 or $400. She had planned to keep it forever in memory of her mother. But now George needed help. She had a trusted friend in Boston, an old teacher. She sent the ring to him, asking him to sell it quickly and send her the money in cash. She also asked him to keep her secret forever. A week after George had lost all hope, something unexpected happened. A neighbor brought a letter from the post office. Since George could no longer see, his mother opened it for him. "George!" she cried with excitement. "Here are $300, and this letter says, 'This money is from a true friend of George Graham. It is for him to see an eye doctor in the hope that he may be cured. The giver does not want thanks and wishes to stay unknown. It is a gift from heaven,' Mrs. Graham said. 'George, we are going to Boston tomorrow. I know you will be cured.'" The next day, George and his mother arrived in Boston. They found a small boarding house to stay in. The following morning, they visited Dr. Annesley, an eye specialist. The first checkup did not bring good news. The doctor said George's eyes would get worse before they got better. An operation might help, but they had to wait. Meanwhile, George had to visit the doctor every day. The waiting was long and difficult. After the surgery, George's eyes were covered with bandages. He and his mother sat in the dark for weeks, waiting and hoping. His mother stayed positive, but George felt only despair. One day, his frustration boiled over. For the first time in his life, he spoke to his mother in anger. "Mother," George said, "please don't talk as if I will surely see again. I don't want to hope too much. If I believe I will be cured and it doesn't happen, I will go mad. I would rather expect nothing." After that, his mother stayed silent. But whenever she left the dark room, people noticed the happiness in her eyes and the hope on her face. Finally, the day came. The doctor removed the bandages. George let out a wild cry. "Mother, I see you." Then, overwhelmed with joy, he fainted at the doctor's feet. It was still a few weeks before he could go home, but the good news traveled fast. His mother wrote to Deacon Grant, who had promised to keep a job for George. The deacon read the letter slowly at home, unaware of how much his niece, Susie, wanted to grab it and read it herself. He didn't notice the happy tears in her eyes. He carefully folded the letter, cleaned his glasses, and then said in his serious way, Well, I am glad to hear that the widow Graham has less trouble now. But where she got the money, only the Lord knows." Later, another letter arrived with their return date. It also asked Deacon Grant to place their house key in the door. Early that afternoon, Susie took the key and walked to their home. She also carried a basket of food from Mrs. Grant, a kind woman who always helped neighbors. Susie's eyes shone with joy as she prepared the house. She set the table, lit a fire in the kitchen, and made everything cozy. Then she picked the last flowers of September and placed them in vases on the mantel and the small sewing table. At last, George and his mother arrived. They had expected an empty house, but instead, they found warmth, light, and the smiling face of Susie Hale.